Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and welcome back to another video. Today I want to share with you some tips and tricks on creating some soft ink blending and also simple masking. But first, I want to remind you to follow me across social media. Those links are going to be down in the description box below. There's a lot of information down there, so be sure to head down there and check it all out. Also, while you're down there, if you enjoy my channel, you can subscribe, and if you like this video, the thumbs up button always helps. For my card today, I'm going to be using these two stamps from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps. All the supplies, everything I'm using today will be listed down in the description box below. I'll be using my mini Misty for my stamping today, and I am working on a 4 by 5 1/4 sheet of heavyweight white cardstock. I'll prep my surface with my embossing bag, and I've already lined up my stamp with the bottom of my paper. So I don't have the bottom of this cup and saucer right up against the edge, but maybe just 1/8 of an inch above it. I'm inking up my stamp with Versamark ink because I'll be heat embossing this in black embossing powder. There are quite a few different ways to do black heat embossing. I'm just using Versamark and black embossing powder today for this particular card. I'll leave a link to in the top right hand corner of different ways to do some black heat embossing if this way you don't like or if it's just not for you. So I went ahead and stamped that down with my Versamark ink, and I heat embossed that with some black embossing powder. Now, while I had my stamp on my Misty, I'm also going to go ahead and stamp it right down onto some masking paper. This is Inkadinkado masking paper. That is a mouthful. But I cut this out with a slight border around it. Now, with a simple sand like this, you do want to go ahead and make sure you cut all those little pieces out of the center as well, where a sky would shine through. I like to use a craft knife for this. So for my regular cutting, I use just a pair of small scissors. But for this, I like to go ahead and go in with my craft knife. And again, I leave that border. Now, one tip for whenever you're placing down your mask, take your time. This is going to be the main focal point of the card, and you want to make sure that you get everything right the first time. So if you take your time and place down your mask correctly to begin with, you won't have to do any corrections later on. So I like to go ahead and take my time and line this up. I start in one corner and kind of work my way around the image, going section by section. On larger masks, especially like this one, I need to go ahead and take it section by section. It's not all going to line up at one point. You just have to go little by little, making sure everything gets lined up. And of course, this one has a nice white border around it, so I needed to make sure that I had it all correctly centered. Now moving on to the ink blending. I so struggle with soft backgrounds. The first thing that I always do before I start is make sure my brush is clean. That is essential when you're using these light colors. Another thing that I focus on is my color choice. If at all possible, I like to go for more pastel ink colors. I also like to use dye inks whenever I go in with soft ink blending. I find dye inks settle into the paper better, and they are less likely to give me those harsh lines. So in this instance, I'm using Catherine Pooler dye inks, which blend really well. And these are all very, very soft colors. So I'm using It's a Girl, Limoncello, It's a Boy, and Pixie Dust. These are all pastel colors. Another thing that I like to do, or that I would suggest that you do, is find a brush or a tool for ink blending that works best for you. This has taken me a long time. I started off with the Tim Holtz mini ink blending tools, the round ones, and those are good. They're great for getting color on quickly. They're great for coloring images, that kind of thing. However, I just could never get a soft blended look with those tools. They just weren't for me for that specific technique. So if you're having trouble with the tools you're using, maybe try something different. You could also use the clarity brushes. Those are very good for doing ink blending. However, I find those leave stroke marks for me. But maybe they don't for you. So try those out too. Work with them, see if that works best for you. These tools are what works great for me for ink blending that I have found. These are cheap makeup brushes from Amazon. You could also get the Picket Fence Studios life-changing blending brushes. They're just a more expensive version. These look identical to them. They're what I've been using for months and months. I've had no shedding. The color cleans really well. I haven't given these a really good bath yet even, and I don't get transfer of color. They don't smell or anything like that. So this is what's working for me right now. You could also try some of the Nuvo brushes. People have had great success with those. I've even seen people use like barber brushes, that kind of thing. So find a tool that works good for you. And the only way you can do that is to experiment around. Maybe you have a crafty friend who you can go try some of their tools before you go in and purchase and see if that works for you. Something else to focus on too is the cardstock you're blending on. I'm using what I always use for ink blending, which is 110-pound cardstock. I get mine from Michael's, and this is what works for me. However, if you're struggling with those marks or maybe you're getting some funky texture in there, switch up your cardstock and see if that helps you. Another thing, whenever you're blending, when you're just starting out, I find it easier to not blend on regular cardstock. So maybe you should start on something like Bristol Smooth cardstock or perhaps even watercolor paper. I always get a better blend on watercolor paper. You just need to be careful whenever you're blending that because colors sit on top of the paper and it will move around on you. While you're blending, you also want to make sure that you keep your fingers off of the blending. So once you start to get those colors ink blended on, keep your fingers on the mask or get an extra piece of cardstock. That's going to keep fingerprints off and save you a lot of time and hassle. I've done it too many times to count where I've gotten a fingerprint right at the end. Now, I blended all those colors together, kept it very, very, very soft. I hope those tips and tricks help you find what works for you. This is something that I have struggled a long time with getting that ink blending, and after 10 years of card making, I finally got it. So that's how I did it. I went ahead and removed that mask, and in this particular stamp, there are little openings. I didn't want to leave those stark white. I also didn't want to color them in black, so I grabbed a gray colored pencil and very quickly colored those in lightly. This is just going to add the tiniest bit of color to those wings and their little dresses, and also the cup as well. This card I'm making today is for the Coffee Lovers blog hop, the Spring Coffee Lovers blog hop. So I am using the sentiment, friends are therapists you can drink with. Now, I don't drink alcohol, so I'm more of a coffee drinker, socially is what I drink. So this works for me with this particular image that I'm using today. I thought it just fit perfectly. So I went ahead and lined that up in my mini Misty. I already have my background done, so I do not want to screw up the sentiment at this point. I'm using the Midnight ink from Catherine Pooler to go ahead and stamp that down. I like to line up my sentiment and then I'll look through once I grab it with my lid and make sure that it's all lined up. If it's a little crooked, I'll go ahead and fix that just by looking through and using the grid lines on my mini Misty. Now with a simple card like this, I wanted to find a few different ways to kind of jazz it up a little bit. So I'm adding some grass and some clouds, and while I'm adding those, I'm going to add some different textures in different ways. For my grass, I'm using some basil cardstock that has little polka dots on it. And then for my clouds, I'm actually going to use the flock transfer sheets from Deco Foil that are new. And they come in white, which is, at first I was like, what am I going to do with the white? And then the more I thought about it, I thought, oh, this is great. This is so much easier to cut than like the felt that you can buy for your clouds, that kind of thing. And it looks so cool on your finished card. Now I also went ahead and cut my grassy border from that basil cardstock. Just those little bit of polka dots and that added texture really helps in the long run. There's a closer look at that cloud as well. You can see the nice texture you get from that flock on there. It's so cool. Now to assemble this card, I just popped up that grass piece and the clouds with some foam tape and added the whole thing to an A2 side folding card base to finish it off. Super duper simple to put together once you get that ink blending done. But that's really where I wanted the focus of this card to be, because I wanted to share what has worked for me over 10 years to find how to do that soft blended look. That's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. There are going to be links on the left side of your screen you can click on. Also, don't forget all the information down in the description box below. Happy crafting, everyone!